right. Good, wonderful, wonderful morning. It is so great to be back. Today's a pretty special, straightforward episode. We're going back to the beginning. I realize we've done 55 episodes due to various things. It's been a year since we've been live on the podcast, since we've recorded the podcast, anything. It's been crazy. So I figured we'd go back to the beginning, talk about how we got started, what we're getting started with, what we're all about, bring us up to date on the topics so that we can go forward. What's interesting, though, is, we talk about the ancient gods a lot. And this is episode 55. 55 is also the number of Enlil before he rose to the throne and then claimed his father's number of 60. I never really understood what the numbers were about, but it's got the numbers, so why not? Why not, just roll with it? I don't know. But we're going to continue to talk about everything today, bring us up to date, and then we're going to continue forward. Those of you who weren't here, Enlil is the firstborn son of the almighty Lord Anu, who's the original deity in Sumeria. Enlil is not actually the firstborn. Enlil's the secondborn, but he's the firstborn of his father who mated with his half-sister. And then, because of that union, by their laws of the Anunnaki, he is the heir, not the actual firstborn son, which is pretty interesting. And so, you think about it, it's also, there's another point I wanted to get to is we're in the year 2025 now, but in other cultures, it's not the year 2025. We've talked about in the past through our episodes about time and perception and how we measure time is all based on a belief. Right now, we're in the year 2025, in the year of our Lord, because we, in our Western society, who have adopted Christianity, believe that we start counting since around the year of his birth, which religious scholars say 0, which was the year 0 to 1 AD was when he was born. But that's only because that's when Constantine in 312 and in subsequent years with his council debated on that date. Most scholars actually believe that he was born in the year 3 BC of what we calculate today. Recently, I heard a new study that came out, this was like last year, that maybe they're thinking now that Jesus might have even been born in 6 BC or even 8 BC, which means that we're not even living in the year 2025 based on our own calendar count. We don't know when the guy was born. So if he was born in 3 BC, then we're actually in the year 2028. If he was born in 6 BC, then we're actually in the year 2028 plus 3 more, which 2029, so then we're going into 2030. So, it's like, it's all your perspective. The recent New Year, I don't know if you've noticed, but recently in the Jewish New Year, it was the year 5535 or something. Which, if you think about it, actually makes sense. Because first of all, in the Bible it says Abraham left the city of Ur to go found to the promised land that God has promised him. The city of Ur was the capital city of the Sumerian culture, which is where the Anunnaki gods reigned supreme. So right away we have an example of a actual calculation that we can measure, because we know that the Sumerian civilization is 5,000 plus years old. So we could speculate that about 5,500 years ago, maybe Abraham left, and that's when the Jewish calendar started counting. Because if he was in Sumeria, and Sumeria was 5,000 plus years ago, we could speculate that that's when he went through. And then we know that a couple thousand years later, Moses came in the Egyptian Empire and all of that. So we know we can actually measure these things. So if you really think about it, the Jewish calendar is actually pretty accurate. It just starts at a different time than we start. It starts at a different point of origin. The Christian calendar starts at Jesus' birth. The Jewish calendar starts when Abraham fled the city of Ur to go to the promised land that his God has promised him. And so they continue on, and you continue to measure it. So it's all a perspective of when you started counting. Because if we really started counting from when the first hominids began appearing on the planet, then that was 250,000 years ago. So what about when the first modern day Homo sapiens rose out of those hominids? Right? That was like 50 to 55,000 years ago. So what if we started counting from there? We're not in the year 2000 then. In every instance, our time frame shifts. That's one of the things that continues to interest me. Because if we go to Mars, your time frame shifts. If I start orbiting a moon around Jupiter or Uranus or something else, my time is different. If I go to that planet versus the moon I was just on, my time is different. First of all, Jupiter and Uranus are giant masses of gas and chemicals and everything, and it's very dense and gravitationally driven, so time would go a lot faster there for you in your perspective, even if the planet rotates slower, because you're at a stronger sense of gravity. All right, I want to get into the I want to quickly review and go through and talk about the previous 54 episode titles. I'm going to go through, talk about some of my favorite things from that time. As usual, none of the show is scripted. None of this is written down. We just get here and talk with friends. So, I don't know. Let's hear from the Pressure Boys while I take a sip of coffee.
Hey, yo, this is Cece from Pressure Boys, the best smoke on the East Coast, and you're watching the WARRmultiverse. Sheesh!
Sheesh. Man, that was some good coffee. All right, cool. So, what we need to do is, obviously, the first episode is called Welcome to War. We're the WARRmultiverse. It's pretty straightforward. You are getting the introduction into us. Great. All right. Number two is World at War. This is when I began talking about military conquest. The reason I began talking about this is not only because it interests me and it's highly important to the human psyche, development of societies, how we spend our money, everything. So, World at War was all about World War II, obviously, the onset of it, you know, how it really began to affect the future of the world from where we're in now. Because we know that the future of the world completely changed. Everything changed. I mean, you know, we here in the West, the entire World War II, kept hearing how strong Germany was, how advanced the technology was. And what's crazy is if you watch a lot of documentaries and read a lot of the accounts, when our soldiers get into Germany and get into there, one of the shocking things that they say is they were shocked to see so many horses. They weren't as advanced. They had all this technology, but a lot of it was experimental. And even the rockets and everything were all experimental to them. So they never shored up the supply line to continue forward and bring everything to bear. And that was one of their downfalls too, when they were doing one of these massive conquests, when they were fighting on multiple different fronts, is Hitler would never shore up his troops. They would send, their railways were just like one train, not very efficient, didn't go all the way through, and, you know, so it would just be one train going. They focused on, you know, the crazy part of what they were doing, all the killings and the murderings and shit. But they didn't shore up their troops, and and Hitler would just abandon them, tell them to fight till the last man. It was ridiculous. And so that was one of their biggest downfalls. And it was this, so when a lot of their troops, what would happen is they would run out of gas in areas, in trucks and their cars and everything, and they would just abandon them and get on a horse, just like the old days. And it was just ridiculous. So everything's always your perception, how you perceive it. But when the American forces arrived, and we had heard all of these crazy things about their technology and how they had all these mechanized warfare and mechanized forces and everything, and what they did is when we got there, we had mechanized everything. We didn't bring horses. We brought our troops. We brought our supply lines. We shored up our troops to keep us going. When your truck ran out of gas, you had gas to fill it up to keep going. When Patton wanted to drive forward and have the troops all behind him, his truck had gas. They had ammo, you know, and they just kept on going. Because we shored up the troops. We had the technology in mass numbers. They didn't do that. It was like just if I invented a gun and then said, all right, I'm gonna go, you know, take on the whole army or whatever. How's that gonna work when you got your one gun against hundreds of thousands of millions of guns? It's ridiculous. So it changed the world. It changed the future of everything, because once you have that kind of technology, that mechanized force, it's not going anywhere. You've literally changed the world to the entire thing. You know, we had cars and people talking and all these things, but it didn't. We had that here in small recreational amounts, but then once it started being built in mass numbers by the military, by civilians, by the civilian workforce, people wanted it too. And it grew on and kept going, and there were businessmen who had the ideas, and militaries and government who had the ideas too, and gave out contracts to people to get things going. There's a lot of world-changing choices in that moment. Episode 3 is titled Bushido. Now this is a, how should I say, great importance for me, an important talking point for me, because I grew up doing martial arts and learning about honor and the code and chivalry and all of that from my masters and stuff. And then I grew up at learning about all these different other cultures who had similar beliefs of honor and chivalry and the code to live by. And I realized too, religion was the same thing. Religion gives you a code to live by. Religion gives you a belief and understanding in some sort of way. And in Japan, the Bushido code is a combination. Much like religious in the West, the actual, their chivalry code and everything in those different kingdoms and the knighthood and all of that. And what is that going on? Anyway, and so we had, what? I don't get it. When did I disconnect from the internet? It doesn't say I ever did. Alright, anyway. So, the Bushido code, in Japan, their entire culture was based on the warrior way and the warrior mentality and belief. And I don't get it. I'm not dropping any frames. How did I disconnect from the internet? I don't understand. Alright, whatever. Makes no sense, but okay. The Bushido code is all about your way of life based on being a warrior. And in Zen Buddhism, it was the samurais who were, I'll talk more about this and go, but it was the samurais who followed the Bushido way and their code, and their religious beliefs were called Zen Buddhism, for they believed in Buddhist philosophy of peace and all of that, but unfortunately life isn't so nice. So they had to, adapt, and they adapted their Buddhism, and it became Zen Buddhism to allow them to have this warrior way, but it was not, glorified to kill all these people and do all these things. You had to give penance and beliefs and all of that. The fourth title was called WARR. I don't remember what we talked about in that one. Probably just like different wars among the people. Alright, that's one. And different societies and how they get started. Frontline, episode 5, is about just being a soldier on the front line throughout all the different centuries and all the different millennium, and and time. Um, how horrible it is. And then episode 6 was the opposite of that. It was the back end force, command decisions, how difficult it is to give command and make the tough decisions at times. You're talking about hundreds or thousands or millions of lives on the line. It's not a happy, wonderful thing to do, and you hear stories of Eisenhower and McCarthy and Patton, just brooding for hours and hours on end because they're sitting there and their one decision that they're about to make is about to put millions and millions of lives on the line. I mean, it's not a happy thing. And thousands, and especially in World War II, thousands of people would be dead in the span of a couple hours. Same thing with World War One. Hallowed Ground, episode 7, The Forgotten War. That was all about, which Forgotten War was that? The war that we all forgot about, including me just now. Off the top of my head. We'll go back. Man, this is great coffee. Episode 8 is Hallowed Ground, all about the soldiers that we lose. And then episode 9, and Hallowed Ground, you gotta remember that it's not just about the soldiers that we lose and then bury in the cemetery and all of that. It's about the soldiers that we lose and their bodies are lost in the battlefield, just in society, in the war. They're just gone, and we can't recover their bodies because of X, Y, and Z, and that area of where all those people are lost becomes hallowed ground. Same thing also in religion. Hallowed ground is where the gods were, or God was. In the case of many ancient cultures, the hallowed ground is the landing place of the gods. You find in Sumerian mythology of the Anunnaki, there's actually a literal place called the landing place. I mean, it's ridiculous, which Zecharia Sitchin believed was in Baalbek in Lebanon. So, we'll see. Episode 9 was called The Warrior, and this was all about the individual soldier, the individual psyche, the individual mind. That's what this episode was about, and it's very important because you have to remember that each soldier is an individual. You're fighting for the unit. You're fighting for your brother next to you. You may be fighting for the beliefs of your culture ultimately, or religion, or whatever the case may be. But in reality, once you get there on the front lines, you're fighting for the guy next to you, because that's all there is. Your country is thousands or hundreds of miles away or whatever. It's not, it's different maybe in the Civil War or in a civil war because you're fighting on your territory. But even still, when you're on the front lines, it's all about, the guy next to you, because there's nothing else at that point. It's you, your life, and the guy next to you who will help save your life, and you'll help save their life. There's nothing else but that. And then number 10 was The Warrior Part 2, Zen. This is where I delve deep into Zen Buddhist beliefs and the pillars of Buddhism, and how they relate to the warrior way, because, it's interesting, in the Middle Ages, in the 1100s, and in the early 1000s, thousands, I don't even know, is 1000s a word? Probably not. I just made that up. Oh well, I'm a god, so it's fine. I can make up words. The Zen Buddhist beliefs are really unique among other warrior religious cultures, because they used to be, like, for example, when you're in medieval Christendom, they postulated that you can have the warrior fight as long as you're the Christian fight, and use a sword as long as you're doing it in the act of God, or in the will of God, or in this case the will of the Pope, who's supposed to be God's quote unquote voice. Which is interesting, because every religion ever has a person who speaks for the deity that they worship. The Sumerians had it. They were the priestly class. The Jews had it, especially when they were escaping from Egypt. First you had it with Abraham, the leader. Then you had Moses, who was able to commune with God through the burning bush, which is me. He was talking to me, actually. What happened is somebody dropped my phone about like 100 years from now through like a portal. And I'm sorry, I'm being sarcastic. No, but they always communicated with a deity, some sort of deity. Always talked to them. In Greece, you had the oracles, and who would talk to the deity. It would sit there, breathe in some gases, hallucinate some shit, and then just tell you that she's communicating with the god and give you the answer. And what's crazy is, if you go to Delphi, you can still see those signs where people actually write down the answers and the questions that they've got. And I hope to be able to go there one day, but we'll see. And but they believed that you can be a faithful servant and wield the sword also at the same time. But in Zen Buddhism, the samurai believe the same thing, but you can't. But it was very different. It was the same but different. All they had the same beliefs in a way of living honorably and with a creed and all of that. But then they had the even more stricter, rigid policies. And then Buddhism, we know, is a very peaceful religion, so it's kind of contradictory. But they would do all these different prayers and bowing to the gods and the religions. And it's also, Zen Buddhism is also a combination of the Japanese original religion of Shintoism. So it's like a mix of Shintoism, Buddhism, and being a soldier on the front line. Very interesting. Then in episode 11, I began to tease you about the gods. The episode 11 was called The Overlords. And the Overlords, as we know, are not only the Anunnaki gods and all the other gods from mythology and different religions that we've talked about, but they are also the Watchers, the ones that we hear about in all different religions, and in Christianity especially, the ones who came down onto Mount Hermon originally and landed, descended from the heavens, which in those days, anything that was just above this, where you could see in the sky, was the heavens, which today we just call that space, or the upper atmosphere. So, it's the same thing. So if you realize that when they say the heavens, they're talking about space, then what they're talking about is an extraterrestrial being landing down here on the planet. And what's interesting is, you could say, oh, it's all these mythologies and stuff, and sure, it is, and a lot of it's misinterpreted over the years. The beliefs are warped, the memories of how it happened is warped and not, exactly how it happened back then. But the story persists. When you're describing the noises that you hear and the sounds and the quaking of the earth, it's more than just a vision. Because in the visions, you don't necessarily have sound and all of that. You just see what you want to see and hear what you want to hear. And it's visions are always warped by our own psyche as well. Everything is, even our entire world. It's all perspective. So then we teased you, then we went back and talked about World War II, World at War II. And it's really because, we don't realize how many different fronts there were in World War II. We don't realize how many different literal land masses that we fought on and fought over. I mean, it was literally called a world war because it was a world war. I appreciate you. And so, but what was interesting was that, you go to these they went to these indigenous cultures in multiple different areas because they had to conquer these outlying islands and use them as military launching points. Both the Japanese and the United States did this, as well as their allies in other areas. And what ended up happening is in a lot of these remote islands, they sprang up these cargo cults, and they still do this to this day in some of these areas, where back in the day, they would literally build, the United States came in with a ship, built a runway, landed some planes, the indigenous people came out, went, who's this? What's going on? And then we said, oh, nice to meet you, and we don't understand your language and you don't understand us, but here's this food that we got. Here, you can have this. Here's this coffee and this water, and try these cigarettes and all these different things. And you literally go and look out and say, oh my God, there's all these different, these divine beings came down and just handed us free food. We didn't have to hunt for it. We didn't have to work for it. We didn't have to do all these things. They're like the ancestors that visited us in the past. They are the gods. And then World War II ended, and they left. And then these people went out and said, where are our divine ancestors who brought us our food? And they started building these wooden airplanes all over these runways. It's ridiculous. And then they started doing all these worshiping ceremonies. And we would make offerings. And then the people, the leaders of those societies would say, yeah, that's our divine ancestors. And this is our divine ancestors, and we are out here going to, if you give us your offerings to them, we'll give them to the gods. So then they take advantage of these people, and they become the rulers of the society, who are the ones who are divine and can communicate with the gods. But it's not the gods. It's all this misinterpreted nonsense. In reality, regular humans came and visited these remote islands and said, hey, we see that you're not as advanced as us. Here's some food. You know, you don't need to starve as much as you were. Why is it so far-fetched to say that extraterrestrials came here and did the same thing? Said, hey, these are our people, these were our deities, and, you know, we came here and, you know, human beings landed, and that was it. Other types of beings landed and said, hey, you're not as advanced as us. Here's our food. Here's some of this. Come check it out. You know, it's unbelievable how people think it's like crazy, but it's not crazy. You know, it just makes perfect sense. If you were to come here, say, hey, we do the same thing now. We're looking to literally do the same thing now. We're looking for planets and figuring out eventually how we can get there. We need to, and multiple scientists are out there trying to figure out different things. They're trying to figure out how to make space flight faster, how to travel faster with rockets, make our rocket ships faster, how we can do different things, like use the gravity of a planet or a star to give us a little boost and warp around it. You know, they're trying all different things. There's people working on the Mach principle to use it as Mach propulsion. There's people working on warp drives like we saw in Star Trek. You know, there's people working on all different things and different ways to try and get there the same way. So eventually 100, 200, 300, 1,000 years from now, what if we eventually have the technology? What about 1,000,000 years from now, we all of a sudden get to another planet? We're 1,000,000 years more advanced than we are now. It would be the same thing. I'm getting ahead of myself with the topics. But it would be the same thing as if we came down, saw them, and said, hey, you know, you're not as advanced as us. Here's this knowledge. Here's this food. Blah, blah, blah. And then you go and worship them because, oh my God, they're smarter than I am. They're more advanced than I am. They do this and that. And, you know, they have this technology because they're like the gods. They can do these things. They can fly through the air like birds. They can do all this because we couldn't. It's the same thing. Scorched Earth was all about destruction of war and how it's necessary to episode 13, Scorched Earth. It was all about how it was necessary for you know, to go through and destroy areas as you go. I spoke a lot about Vercingetorix versus Julius Caesar. Seriously? I just disconnected. It was all about Vercingetorix and Julius Caesar. You know, Vercingetorix went down and conquered and dropped the everywhere he went, he destroyed the territory so that Julius Caesar couldn't farm the lands, couldn't chop down trees, couldn't, you know, to build bridges and trebuchets and stuff, couldn't, you know, hunt for food and all of that. And so what he did is he scorched the earth so that his enemy couldn't do all these things. But it ended up kicking him in the ass because he couldn't do those things either. And when Julius Caesar trapped him in Elysium in Gaul, or Elysia, and trapped him in Elysia in Gaul, you know, he literally couldn't send out people to hunt for food. Neither could Julius Caesar, but Julius Caesar had him trapped. He could spare a few thousand troops to go a few miles or 10 miles away and hunt some food and then come back. So it was okay. It was a little bit better for Caesar, but not as for him. Then I also talked about General Sherman in the Civil War, with Sherman's march to the sea, where everywhere he went, from the north to the south, he just went in a straight line and conquered and scorched the land everywhere he went to destroy the South and just cause as much chaos and hardship as possible. He would find a farm that was a Southern-owned farm, and he would go there and burn it to the ground so that the South couldn't get those crops and use those crops. It was the same thing. Episode 14 was all about belief. I tried to focus on the beliefs of the inner psyche, how you believe in your mind, and how it dictates you and everything you believe in, and everything you focus on now to the future and all around. And bro, was popping my G, my brother. You knew where to find me. This is my brother from another mother right here. It was all about belief and how people believe in everything and how it affects their modern day life. For example, I just said how people justify their beliefs in killing by believing in it in a religious way. Japanese Buddhism, regular Christianity's Knights Templar, and all of that. It's all justified in their own beliefs. And so what happens is no matter what you do, you believe it. Look at today's modern day Islamic extremists. They do the same thing. Dude, why does it keep fucking... I don't understand why it does that. I'll read those messages later, bro. What happens is the belief of the psyche, right. All right, the belief in the psyche. So, what happens is whatever you do, you justify it based on your beliefs. From the most mundane thing to the most important, crucial societal level thing. Whatever you do is always justified based on your beliefs. As a society, look at medieval Christendom, they would do the same thing. They would go and they would persecute somebody and say, you don't believe what I believe, so you're evil, and we're going to burn you at the stake, or we're going to hang you because you're a witch, or some other nonsense, because this is what we believe. We believe that you're evil, you're a witch, you're blah, 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 and we're going to kill you for it, and our God will thank us. It's the same thing, I just watched a whole documentary just the other day about Ivan the Terrible. Ivan the Terrible, one of his first acts was, he was also known as Ivan the Impaler, because one of his first acts was to get revenge on a bunch of people, and he had literally had them impaled. And the same thing with Vlad the Impaler, too. Vlad the Impaler in Hungary did the same thing. He got revenge on his people, and he impaled them also, but Ivan the Terrible was known for much more terrible things, so that wasn't the only terrible thing. But that's why he became terrible and not just the impaler. But Ivan literally, one of the first things was just go and kill a bunch of people. And then he was a devout Christian. And he would sit there and literally go to church all the time, pray to God, pray to Jesus, pray in his beliefs, and then go and murder a bunch of people. He even murdered his own son. He's just he's a murderer. And the whole point is because, but it was justified to him in his beliefs. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But the belief on the inner psyche is fascinating to me, because I don't believe many things. I believe whatever I can believe, and that's the end of it. I believe what I learned and what we know to be true, and if I learned that whatever I thought was true before is not true, and then I learned the actual truth, that's fine with me. I'm not going to get mad because you told me my beliefs were, unfounded or whatever. That's ridiculous and illogical. I'm gonna believe the truth because that's the truth. Why would I focus on believing something else? Yet the entire world, the entire psyche of the world believes in something else. For example, or maybe we'll get to this later. This is a good topic. I keep going through the topics, and then getting into the other topics that we talked about in the future. So I'm going to keep going through the topics. We're already 50 minutes into the episode, so we got plenty of time, and this is going to go faster. We're only still in season 1. Episode 15, fraudulence, pretty self-explanatory. Just go out there and listen to it. Season 2, episode 1, also known as episode 16, The Return. So in case you don't know, each season is about 15 episodes. This is technically episode 11 of season 4. It's episode 10 of season 4. So we all have, we're going to keep going. Episode 1 is called The Return. The Return is all about the return of the gods. See, every single culture has a belief that their deity will one day return to us. Return from, what the hell was that noise? Return from something. And every single culture has this belief. The Sumerians believed that the Anunnaki would one day return. And they believed that they returned every time their planet got close to Earth, which was about every 3,600 years. The Jews believe that the Messiah is going to come one day. The Christians believe that Jesus was the Messiah and he already came back, and that he would then again return someday in the future for the end of days. The Muslims believe that, in Islam believe that Muhammad will one day return as well. The Buddhists believe that Buddha never actually died. First of all, that his spirit just reincarnated, even though we do know for a fact that he did physically die one day, and that his followers cut up pieces of his body to take his keepsakes. It's kind of pretty morbid. But they believe that his spirit will return one day. Literally in Tibet, the entire culture, they have 2 or more people who return. They literally believe that the Dalai Lama was an extraterrestrial god who came down to Earth and inhabited the body, and then has been subsequently reincarnating ever since. And I think the Dalai Lama is what, the 14th incarnation of his spirit, but he says that it's the 20-something incarnation of his spirit, that he existed in other planets and everything, and he has memories of all these other worlds and stuff. So, and then there's the same thing of the Pachai Lama, who is apparently still being held as a prisoner in whatever, I don't know. I'm not too familiar with that political structure, so I won't comment on it. So every culture has a belief that their deity will one day return. And so, you know, I think it's important to recognize that I think that it goes back to the psyche of belief that, you know, when it's like almost like a defense mechanism where you say, oh, I believe in this God or that God, and then people say, well, where is your God? There's no God. And then you say, oh no, he's always watching, he's coming back, and you said there was no God, and he's going to strike you down, blasphemy, no, 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 no. But it's just like a psychiatric defense mechanism. It's like you just justify where your world is changing. It's ridiculous. You know, everything is always, people always transpose their beliefs on God and everything. You know, I always talk about that. Episode 2 is when we really begin to delve into the modern day UFO conspiracy. The modern day UFO conspiracy, everybody thinks begins with Roswell, which is not true. We know that the modern day UFO conspiracy dates all the way back to the Civil War, to the Revolution, to Christopher Columbus's maiden voyage, and so forth. But the modern day really UFO theory starts off in the late 1800s of a cylindrical object taken over over a mountain. I forgot the name, I'm sorry. Over a mountain, and it's a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO, which actually I saw one a few months ago, about 300 feet long. The thing was fucking nuts. And we'll talk about that. We're going to have an episode to deal with my recent UFO sightings, and I think I know what they are now. I think I've come to a conclusion, an understanding of really what it all is. So we'll probably get there in a future episode. You know, we're going to get there, of course. We're still working with the timeline that we had outlined in many of the beginnings episodes. But the UFO conspiracy really begins in the late 1800s with the advent of cameras. You know, there's a picture of it, of the cylindrical shaped object. You can look it up. Was it Mount Adams? Maybe it is. Anyway, but the whole point is the modern UFO conspiracy theory really begins in the early times. But what you could really also interpret that as being is also a religious experience, because you have beings appearing to them and claiming to be so-and-so. Look at Joseph Smith and the founding of the Mormon Church. That's in our modern times. Yet a deity came to him. And what's interesting is Mormons actually believe in extraterrestrials, because they believe that the angel Moroni came down to them, and he was from a planet in the Pleiades. He literally said, I come from what you call the constellation of the Pleiades. Right there. He's saying I'm a fucking extraterrestrial. So, there you go. That's one. It begins all over the world, but these modern day UFOs that we see in our sky are very different. It's not the same as a religious belief, unless you talk about Ezekiel's wheel, where Ezekiel witnessed the wheel, which probably could have been some sort of extraterrestrial or other craft. Who knows what kind of craft? Ultra-terrestrial maybe, meaning that they were from another dimension or something, or the future, whatever. Episode 3 was the primordial ooze. Episode 18. We talked about the beginning of the universe when there was nothing. But we know that there was something, actually. Because it was just something in the form of a really, 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 really tiny microscopic pinprick. There was still something in the beginning. Some theorists used to theorize that there was a primordial ooze and that everything existed as some sort of dust or rocks or something in space and whatever, and what we call the Big Bang is just some sort of event that launched it all into motion and whatever. Before then, everything just sat in like this soupy material or whatever. Most of that today has been disproven. We know that that's not really true today. But there are some people out there who still believe in such a thing. Mostly it derives from, I think, a understanding of Christian religion and combining it with science, because your Christian religion really states that God went there and then there was light and then there was this and created everything, from whatever was there. So it's crazy. What does this say? I don't know. I thought I got a breaking news notification. I would have given it to you live, but it's not as interesting. And then, there we go. And then, so people still believe in it. But what I think is that religious beliefs tie into that belief of a primordial ooze, that there was something before and God just gave life to it, gave breath to it. God is the consciousness. And actually, if you look at ancient Vedic beliefs in India and their culture, they're actually the ones who suggest that there was a primordial ooze, a beginning of belief in the world. They say that there was that there was something, and that there was a whole universe that existed before. And God is the consciousness that wakes up to the understanding that it's a universe. It's the awakenness of the universe. It's what gives all conscious beings consciousness and throughout the whole universe. Again, I think that's just transposing God on something, but they were right in also talking about a Big Bang creation, and they even have modern day akins to string theory. So who knows? Maybe they just understood consciousness on a level that we didn't. Maybe what they were actually talking about was that the Big Bang was some sort of, chemical reaction or something that happened billions of years ago, and then one day, over the course of the creation of the universe, there was an awakening of a god who realized that he was, the universe's essence or spirit. So that's another one. That could be some sort of concept that you may or may not want to look into. But so it is a belief that's out there. The next episode was called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and I wanted to talk about how we were exactly that, searching for extraterrestrial intelligence in different ways, different sciences, different observational techniques, all of the above. Episode 5, this is where we start getting into the more in-depth discussions, mental in-depth discussions. Episode 5 is called Time. This is when I started to begin speculating on how time exists differently in different areas of the world, in different areas of the universe, how time is different all around, is all about your perspective. And we started talking, I'm not going to continue talking about this because we started talking about it in the beginning, but it's all based on your belief when you start measuring all of the above. The next episode was called Bigfoot. This is when I put forth the theory, my theory that, and others' theory that Bigfoot is actually just a lost hominid species. It may even be the fact that these giant bones that some archaeologists are finding all over the world that some archaeologists are finding all over the world is that you literally could be finding evidence of a Bigfoot. I mean, it's just, and some of these people who have studied the ancient myths about giants and these supposed giant bones and whatever, a lot of them theorize that they were like 8-9 feet tall and had red hair, white complex skin, even whiter than, just like really white complexity of his skin. And supposedly they could have been some of our ancestors. And what's realized is what I think is they could have just been a lost hominid species. There were other, maybe because they grew giant, they had some sort of reproductive lacking, and they weren't able to produce. Maybe they were only able to make one per couple or something like that. They could only have 1 or 2 kids, and then if they had more, they died or something like that. It could be, and then they were so giant that human beings killed them off with the rest of the hominids that were around at the same time as us. And it's all different. But modern day geneticists, who are studying our genes and how hominids are connected to you in our gene pool, and we realize now that a lot of these hominids, we either mated with them or killed them off, and that's it. That's what happened. There's nothing in between. And Bigfoot could have just been one of those lost hominid species, just another one. And modern day geneticists agree that there's 1 or 2 more species out there that we might be descended from. Ancient astronaut theorists say, this is the aliens. These are the extraterrestrial gods who came down and made us in our image. And that missing link of DNA is them. Could be the Bigfoot. We don't know yet. Number 7, I got into time part 2. Again, we talked about time, a bunch of different things today, so I'm not going to continue on with that. The next episode was called Dreams. The reason I talked about this is because I don't dream, the only time I ever have a dream, it always comes true in reality. So I don't dream, and when I do dream, I know it's going to happen in the future. But dreams are depths into the inner psyche. Do I really know what's going to happen in the future? Of course not. It's just that, our reality is based on different courses of events and how we measure those events. So I would, in reality, if I were quote unquote predicting the future, I would really just be predicting the most likely course of events based on X, Y, and Z information. That's all it would be in reality. So it's not anything crazy. But dreams are also deep dives into the inner psyche of a person. They're also a deep belief in how a person views the world in their mind. And it's fascinating in that sort of way because it just, these people, they believe in all sorts of things, and yet I scrolled forward on the thing. You believe in all sorts of things, yet in your own mind, you believe something completely different. Most people will tell you they believe one thing, and then in their private life actually believe something else, because people want to join the multitude, the masses. So then you have our next episode, which was, you know what, I need a large sip of coffee, so why don't you hear from CC from the Pressure Boys right now. We'll take a quick break. You take a sip of your coffee, too.
Hey, yo, this is CC from Pressure Boys, the best smoke on the East Coast, and you're watching the WARRmultiverse. Sheesh!
Man, that's good coffee. So, what's next? The dreams are important. They're important for you to dream based for your own psyche and your own mental health, I think, also. Because, sometimes your dreams are just your own consciousness, subconsciousness trying to tell you something based on your reality and your perspective. Number 9, the next episode, Season 2, Episode 9, it was the God of War, which is me. I am the God of War. And I went through all different cultures about how they all have a God of War that sometimes is their leader, sometimes is just another deity. Excuse me. And the God of War, which is me, Ares, Zeus, Jupiter, you have Kukulkan, Quetzalcoatl in South America. You have the Anunnaki gods who would always fight. All the Greek gods fought. You basically the gods in all of Hinduism. They all fought together. But then they also had a specific God of War that was their God of War. If you think about it, it's almost like a general. See, the thing is, what all got me started in this dive into this is I would read all these religious texts, especially in my own religion of Christianity and Catholicism when I'm growing up. I would read all these texts, and then they would sit there and they would read just like my fantasy novel I was just reading about kingdoms and warring gods and all these things. It would read the same way. God is coming down and landing with his deities and all of that. And and so it's just all ridiculous, and the gods. But it's like having it's like a military general, all right. It's like having a this is the leader of your thing because that's their specialty. Next was 10, where we talked about cults. This was a dark dive into the religious beliefs that are out there. Basically, all religions are a cult, hands down. It's just the ones that we accept are not considered a cult. They're called religion. The ones that we don't accept are called cults or other names for them. And but we just talked about this. We talked about how the cults spring up all over the world. One of the other things I talked about during cults is Ron Applewhite, where he was the what was the name of his cult? Shit. It's killing me. I'm gonna remember it. I need to remember it. What the fuck? So, is that a bug? Bro, chat, you want to see me kill this bug? Anyway, where the fuck you going, bruh? Bro, you want to see me be like a god deity over this bug? Watch, I'm a god deity over this bug. This is how extraterrestrials treat human beings, by the way. Like we're little tiny bugs. In case you didn't know. I'm gonna kill you, bug. How you doing, bug? How the fuck did you get in here? You motherfucker. You are so gonna die, bro. I am so gonna trap you in this. Grab you. Put you in this. Put you in this thing. In this wrapping paper. Put you on the floor. And then step on your ass. Step on your ass. Fucking dumbass fucking bug. Shouldn't have survived. Alright, hold on one second. I'm just gonna throw it out. Alright, so apparently I have to fix that fucking BRB screen that literally worked 2 days ago when I tested it. Alright, great, awesome. So glad I gotta fix that now. Another thing to do, as if I didn't have enough to do. Alright, let's keep going because we're running out of time and we got a lot of more episodes to go through. I mean, we got 55 episodes. Blah, blah, blah. God of War cults. Cults were crazy. Ron Applewhite's cult. I don't know, but he thought him and his co-culter person, founder, thought that they were the two people in the Bible who were supposed to bring the word of God and that the return of the Messiah and the end of days that is described in Christianity, which is all nonsense. Christianity, the Bible was literally written 300 years after Jesus was dead. I mean, come on, it's fucking nonsense. Episode 11 was the Watchers. I briefly touched on the topic. The Watchers were the extraterrestrial beings. I'll tell you exactly who the Watchers are today. They're the Greys. Based on some evidence of the Greys not eating any food or having any physical body type, they might be biological robots made from some sort of synthetic thing that they make out of biological material. the old Watchers were the the gods who came down, Lucifer and the fallen ones in Christianity and Judaism terms, and so on and so forth. Conspiracy, this was the first episode I had it as a question mark instead of a period. The reason is I wanted to talk about different conspiracies, and what the heck is the conspiracy? Conspiracy for what? Why does there even have to be a conspiracy? I'll tell you, the conspiracy begins with all the different how should I put it? Awesome. Just disconnected again. It's awesome. Love that chat. So anyway, alright, whatever. Because there's a conspiracy all throughout the world, as well in our modern day times. There's a conspiracy in our modern day times for either people to misinform, mistell you about, not tell you about, just ignore. Just look at the recent drone sightings in New Jersey and over in New York and everything. I myself saw dozens of drones, not just like the ones that look like civilians, but like military aircraft drones. I knew right away it was our own military. I even speculated as such all across the thing. And Trump gets elected president, has the person tell us, yeah, the White House, whatever, advanced one, comes out and says, yeah, it turns out it was the FAA. Okay. And other government agencies saying it, doing it. Why the whole big conspiracy? If it's government drones, it's government drones. I don't give a fuck. What do you mean? You're telling me that you're putting drones up in the sky to make our home front safer? Military drones that my taxpayer dollars paid for, you're now using to make my country safer? I love that. Awesome. Why the big conspiracy? It's ridiculous. The next episode was called Lightbringer. This is about Lucifer and the fallen angel, all about it, and how he relates to other deities. For example, you could call Lucifer, all in Sumerian, could have been Enki. In many Egyptologists think that in Egypt, the same god was also Ptah. And in Greece, people think it was Hades, but that's wrong. He was probably Zeus. So, because he was the leader, why would it be Hades? So, they were all the same thing. So, I can't believe we just keep disconnecting. It's fucking ridiculous. The next one was called The Great War, about another war. Keep on going. The final episode introduced us into, the final episode of Season 2, introduced us into the next thing that I was going to be talking about, which was more different theories, scientific theories as well, which is sound. And I talked all about how sound, is both a wave and physical force. You hear about how sound is all these different things, and then you hear the speed of sound, you hear about how sound affects the universe around us and the world, you hear all these different things. So sound is very important to the world that we live in. We hear sound all day. I talked about how Pythagoras intuited from the mathematics of sound from hearing the hammer hitting an anvil, and how each time the hammer would hit the object and the anvil together, it would make a different note each time, and also depending on where he hit it in each area. So it was very interesting that way. And I thought it was pure genius how you could intuit such a thing. I mean, I noticed those things too, but I never intuited the mathematics behind it like that. I mean, maybe now because of our education, we just assume it to be so, but I don't know. It's very interesting and smart. Timeline is the next episode, Season 3, Episode 1. Episode 31. This is where we went from how the main purpose of this show is to begin from the beginning and discuss our timeline, how things go all the way up until the modern time. We have to go all the way back to ancient cultures, 5,000 or more years ago, as much as we can know. That's what we're aiming for. The timeline is also, we're trying to look for an accurate timeline, basically. We're trying to look for the accuracy in the world. Then the next episode is alien extermination. This was all about the times that you hear the gods talking about exterminating us humans. Like as if it's no big deal, no problem. Yeah, just wipe them out. All good. What do you mean? They do that all the time. The Anunnaki did that. Enki and the other ones did that. They all did it. It was crazy. And look at our own Christian beliefs. They did the same thing. Yahweh or the Elohim did the same thing. They said, oh, these guys are out of hand. Wipe them out. Take them off the map. The dinosaurs, some accounts say that the first extraterrestrials of the Anunnaki arrived on this planet 270 million years ago. That was well in the time of the dinosaurs. It's possible that they could have wiped them out too, and we just don't know about it. In fact, some of the religions say that that's exactly what happened. Some of the mythologies say that that's exactly what they did. So, basically, there's also reports, by the way, of in the Middle Ages, the so-called mowing devil would literally be a being that would just appear from the sky or out of a shining silvery spinning disc, would touch the ground, and then had this scythe that he would wave back and forth. And it gave the impression that he was cutting the thing, but it would always follow with smoke and all this stuff. So some modern day ancient astronaut theorists are saying that this example of a mowing devil could have been extraterrestrials literally spraying chemicals to weed out the population, to kill us. Or was it to help us? Maybe they were, spraying chemicals that, weakened the plague or strengthened it, but also gave us more immunity to it. Who knows? That's another one. Number 3 is Flight of the Gods. I talked about how all the different spacecrafts that the gods are said to have had, from elongated cylindrical UFOs to all the way to the flying saucers, all the way to the Vimana in ancient Hinduism, the flying carpets in the Middle East and Arabia, all different crafts. The next one was WARR. I don't know. I don't remember what that one was about. Me, WARR, probably me and us. Episode 5 is spoken word. This was one of my favorite episodes I ever did, where I spoke about the spoken word of in the universe, where speaking has a literal impact on the world that we live in, because you're literally speaking the world into existence by thinking about it. And not by thinking about it, by speaking it. When you think about it, you're thinking about it in one way, but then you speak about it, and you're literally imprinting it onto the universe. When you speak about something and you start talking about it, you immediately imprint it onto the universe, because you create the possibility of the opposite to happen. So that was that. The next episode was about prophets. It was called Prophets. It's about all the different prophets that have existed over thousands of years in multiple different religions, including the Anunnaki, including Judaism, including Christianity, including Islam, including the Vedic scriptures, including even, the shamans and all of that. The next episode was called Anunnaki, and this is where we really dove deep into the Sumerian religious beliefs of the Anunnaki and how they relate to other cultures and our modern culture. The next episode is Akasa. Akasa is Sanskrit for the sky, which means, which is where we get the term in our modern day Western culture of the Akashic record. The Akashic record is not the real name for it. It's just what we in our modern culture have coined it as a term. But it's the concept that existed in Vedism and Hinduism of the world existing as in this mental state and in a dream state, and all around us, all fully formed, and we only access parts of it. So when we're looking for the answers to, let's say, a scientific problem, and you become inspired, well, in reality, you've attuned to that specific understanding of the universe because you've been working on it so much. Really, if you think about it, that could just be termed as frame of thought, or thinking, or how you think about something. Literally, also known as logic. I logically began to start at the beginning and think about this, and then I came to this conclusion, and that conclusion helped me think about this, and so on and so on and so forth, until you get to the final result, the conclusion. I mean, it's literally logic. It's not anything crazy to think about. But it's also a belief that it's there. I believe that it could be, if it is a real phenomenon, that it could be some sort of electromagnetic or gravitational phenomenon that traps some sort of energy or something. But I don't know. It needs a lot of study and belief, and even more study on my part, way more study. So we got to figure that out. The next episode was interesting. I titled it Brothers, and it was about how across all different religious cultures and mythologies of founding a religion, you find that there were always two brothers. You have even Jesus. Jesus' brother was named Judas, one of his brothers. Judas was the one who betrayed him, his own brother. Think about it. You have, in Sumerian society, you have Enlil and Enki, the two brothers. Enki being the firstborn, but Enlil being the firstborn of Anu's half-sister. became the heir. That started a rivalry between two brothers. And this goes all the way even to the founding of the mythology of the Easter Island people, who say that the two brothers came from across the sea. And then they left from there and went to the Marquesas Islands and founded their religion and their things. It's different. So it's very fascinating how this happens across the entire world. It leads me, including even Greeks too. You forget, you have Zeus and Poseidon and Hades were brothers. So the next one I talked about were dragons. A lot of ancient astronaut theorists thought that dragons might be a misinterpreted form of technology. Could be true, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm more inclined to believe that they were some sort of remnants of a dinosaur species that existed a few thousand years ago. That, because we know today that dinosaurs still exist in the form of birds and chickens and all of that. We know that the modern day chicken that exists in nature has its ancestry all the way to the T-Rex. You're literally, every time you cook eggs, you're literally eating a baby dinosaur. So it's not out of the frame of thought at all that some sort of avian dragon type of dinosaur could have existed well into the modern times of a few thousand years ago. Obviously not the modern times, but the past few thousand years they could have done it. And then there's all these stories about knights and soldiers and armies going out to hunt dragons. Maybe they did, and maybe there was only 300 of them left on the planet, and then we just wiped them out. Just the same thing we did with the other hominids and all of that. Could be the same thing. The next episode is another interesting one. This is the second episode I have a question mark at. And the reason I have the question mark on this episode is pretty obvious. It's titled, Why? Why go through all of this? Why is there this whole big nonsense on the world of aliens and extraterrestrials and religion and different beliefs and fighting? Why? Why are these gods coming here? Why do we know about them? Why do we believe in them? Why, if it's all nonsense, why does our psyche believe in that? If it's not nonsense, why are they coming here? What do they want? Why is all of this going on? Why do we see UFOs? Why do we see... And that is the heart of what I believe in and why I do all of this. Dakota Me Jib... Yo, cheers, bro. Welcome in. I haven't heard of you in a year, bro. How's the cut of your jib? Why? Why all of this? And then if it's the government, why the big conspiracy theory to cover it up? If it's not the government and it's actually extraterrestrials, why the big conspiracy theory for them to cover it up? It just makes no sense. And there's all these questions and all these things, and I just, that is where the heart of it for me is. Why? Where are all these gods coming from, and why are these gods coming here? What is their story about? The next episode was Angelos. All is well. How about you? All is fantastic now. Life is going great. I got one more problem in life to solve, and then I'm living the dream, my friend. That's it. One more problem. I solved all my other shit. This past year has been absolutely nuts, but I spent a lot of time doing research and more things for the podcast and to learn and to stay educated. So we'll see how it's going. Worked hard a lot, did a lot of writing. Not as much as I would hoped, but enough. Angelos is all about angels, but it wasn't just about angels. It was about being an intermediary. Oh, good to hear, bro. Appreciated, man. Appreciated. Good to see you, always. But it was about these being the intermediaries, the messengers. They were always the messengers of the gods. Hermes in Greece. You had the angels in Christianity. They were always the messengers of their deities. The shamans, again, they're the messengers. All these other cultures, they all had a messenger who would be an intermediary between human beings here on earth and the divine gods up in the sky. They were the intermediaries, the messengers, the ones who bring down the message of the God, the rule of the God. That was them. They did this, the angels. Again, why? But we talked about that. Season 4, episode 13, I talked about atmosphere. Specifically, multiple different planetary atmospheres, how it works scientifically and physically. And then I delved into, the reason I talked about this episode was I delved into Zachariah. I wanted to specifically dive into Zachariah Sitchin's theory about how atmospheres are the real crux of what makes life on a planet and not just how close you are to the sun. Because he theorized, based on reading his inscriptions and his translations of the Sumerian texts, that even though the Anunnaki's planet was in our solar system and orbited 3,600 years and was really far away from the sun, theoretically it should be just a giant ball of ice if it's there. Theoretically, and that's true. However, he says that according to their own teachings, it's really the atmosphere, because the atmosphere holds in the light, holds in the chemicals, holds in the photosynthesis, and different atmospheres on different planets hold in different amounts. Just look at Venus. Their atmosphere is much thicker because it holds in all those greenhouse gases more. We're worried about holding in greenhouse gases on our own planet. So, look at Mars. The atmosphere is much thinner there. So it's different everywhere you go. But I wanted to specifically talk about Zachariah Sitchin's theory on the atmospheres of different planets. So that's what that episode is about. That is a very specific episode. While in a lot of episodes we talk about in general terms and comparisons, this episode was really specifically about Zachariah Sitchin's theory. The next episode was called Time Dilation. This was really interesting because I talked a lot about time dilation on different planets and on our own planet, how time exists differently everywhere you go. This was another continuation of our time topic. And honestly, we're not going to get away from the time topic because it's just like time, even though time doesn't exist. Time is a factor of measurement. Time will never go away because we always got to measure time. We always got to measure our world. But time is just a measurement. The next one was Season 3, Episode 15, where I talked about creative genius. Now this is very interesting because it wasn't only about our geniuses like Einstein and Tesla and everything, although I remember talking a lot about them because it's just so easy to talk about them. But it was also about, just the creative genius in the mind. Can it be unlocked in everyone? The answer is yes. it can be unlocked in everyone. And there are many people out there doing many experiments into this, trying to figure out the inner psyche of a person and the creative genius. One of the most interesting side effects is savant syndrome, where something happens and you get knocked on the head and all of a sudden you're able to play the piano. And you never played the piano in your life, and you're better than Mozart or whatever, and so it was very interesting that way. And it was also interesting how I also remember talking about how the scientists actually went, and once Einstein died, the pathologist, was it the pathologist, the mortician, whatever, the scientist actually took his brain and put it in formaldehyde and took it home and then cut it up into pieces and gave it to other scientists to study. And it was only in recent science that I don't remember the year, what was it, 2020 whatever, they talked about how it was determined that that Einstein's brain had a thicker frontal cortex and more glial cells than the regular person. Could that have made a difference? Maybe. Who knows? There's nobody else to compare it to. We don't have the brain of Nikola Tesla to compare it to. So it's not, or Thomas Edison or something to compare it to. So it's not, we only have their acts and their works. Now we're in the final season, our current season, and man, I knew that this would be a great topic to go through because we're literally almost at the 2-hour mark. You know what? Let's take a sip of coffee, hear from the Pressure Boys for the final part of today. Let's do it.
Hey yo, this is Cece from Pressure Boys, the best smoke on the East Coast, and you're watching the WARRmultiverse. Sheesh.
Sheesh. Sheesh. Sheesh. Sheesh. Sheesh. Up. Alright, finally, Season 4, Episode 1 was called The Return of the Gods. This is where I delved into the fact that the gods all say that they're going to return. We talked about that. Then I talked about how they did return. That's what you don't understand. They did return. They're here. They never even left. They returned thousands of years ago. And they will return again. Over and over and over again. Probably never even left. These gray extraterrestrials, who some are saying could be biological robots, could just be their emissaries out here right now for the gods. Like an ambassador or some shit. That could be it. The next episode was called Death from Above. I delved into weapons, destruction. This is where we went back to a lot of our military topics. Massive weapons falling, but also how it compares to ancient religions and culture. For example, in Mesopotamia we have the story, in Babylon we have the story of the Tower of Babel being destroyed by the gods in one foul swoop. We have Zeus launching down lightning bolts. We have in Hinduism, we have the stories of the Brahmastra weapon, which was the most destruction weapon of all time or whatever, and so it should never to be used amongst your friends or less than a last resort. It's the Shiva weapon, the God weapon. The next episode I talked about was the Visitors. The Visitors, I called it this because of some of the books that are out there called The Visitors. The Whitley Strieber's book also. about how his visitations. But the visitors are just visitors. They're the ones visiting us all the time. And this is where I also dove into the modern theory more than the ancient theory. I'm more, we should clarify one thing. I'm more of an ancient theorist than a modern theorist. I think that a lot of these modern things can be described away with modern science, modern technology, secret technology of our modern age, and all things like that. But it's just that's the way it is. The visitors were just, they're visiting people all the time. They come in, they say, oh, people claim they're being visited by angels, visited by demons, visited by extraterrestrials, but somebody is visiting somebody. That's the point. The next episode was called The Proof. I went through different levels of proof that there are out there. There's proof, the proof from the ancient societies. You have the writings in the books. You have, man, why does it keep doing that? You have the writings in the books. You have the writings on cave walls and the drawings. You have writings in stone tablets, in different manuscripts all throughout the world. It's people there's proof everywhere. There's physical structures, and ancient astronaut theorists and other people point to this as proof of these structures, as proof that there were gods, there were extraterrestrials, and the mythology only proves and backs it up. The next episode was called Enlil. This is where we dove into the creator god Enlil, who was the one who succeeded his father Anu, who was the half-born son of his sister, who was the firstborn son of Anu and his sister, half-sister, but also Anu's second son of his actual wife. Then number 6, season 4, episode 6, we talked about the truth. And the truth behind everything, the truth behind society, the truth behind what we believe in everything, the truth behind different structures, just how our aim and my aim is to get to the absolute truth. Whether I'm wrong in some instances or circumstances does not matter to me. If I'm wrong and we find out later that, here's the proof of why I'm wrong, awesome. I'm glad to know the truth. Thank you. Thank you for telling me the truth. Now I know. Now we know why I was wrong. And now we know why I'm right, because I know the truth now, because you just helped me figure it out. All of that. The next one, we talked about alien construction. Alien constructions, both on this earth and what are perceived to be constructions on other planets, other planetary bodies, what other people perceive as might be, constructions on those other planets, maybe. It's all speculation because we're not there on that planet. We just got photographs from the sky. The next episode was called Eden, where we talked about the origin of man, of Homo sapiens, and the Garden of Eden, its location, the 4 rivers, all of the above, and what it really means. There are even some religious scholars who believe that the Garden of Eden wasn't even on Earth. There are some ancient astronaut theorists who believe that the Garden of Eden was actually on Mars. I don't know. I think if it says that it was between these 4 rivers, and we can find 2 of the rivers still exist today and the other 2 are dried riverbeds, and we can see them today, it's pretty obvious it wasn't on another planet, but, whatever. Number 9 was Origins of the Gods. This is how we talked about the beginning of all the gods, of the beliefs of the gods on our planet, the beliefs of the gods in human psyches, and how they all got their origin. Remember, you have multiple different cultures, saying the same thing about different gods, and they have to all have one single origin because each god is the same. If you look at the Norse god Odin, and you go to the English god Woden, and you go to the Celtic god Lu, and the Roman god Jupiter, and the Greek god Zeus, are all the same guy. They do the same thing. They have the same lightning powers, the same creator divinity powers. They have everything. It's all the same guy. And you can find the same guy in Egyptian religion. I can't speak. Egyptian religion. You can find the same thing in Mesopotamian religion. You can find the same thing in South American cultures in the time, North American cultures in the time. I mean, it's unbelievable. So there has to be one single origin to all of them because we all say the same thing. It's just a different name. We just give the guy a different name and persecute each other to say that you believe in something different than I believe, so you're wrong. Wrong. Your God is the same God. Your Christian God is the same Elohim as in their religion. The Elohim is both a singular and plural religion. The Elohim and the Judaism belief, most likely now we know, stems from the Egyptian belief of, when Moses came out with the single God. We know that it came out of the same time as Akhenaten, the pharaoh, the heretical pharaoh of Egypt, who wiped the multiple cultures away, the multiple gods away, and instilled the fact that there was only one God, the sun disk, Aten. So all of that is the beginning, the origins. And finally, we're here today. Look at that. 2 hours. We're finally here today, returning to the beginning and going all the way through to the end of our show. To the modern time, I should say, because this isn't the end. All right, next week we'll be back. Let's find somebody to raid. Let's see who's on. So Monday, next week we'll be back on Saturday. Gonna have a lot of fun. And I'm excited to continue talking about everything and to delve deeper into more topics. I had a lot of fun. Sorry for the whole cutout. It'll be fixed next time. We'll keep an eye on it. So much love to y'all. I think we're gonna have a good time. So let's get out of here, and you enjoy the rest of your day, chat. Let's put on some of this music again. Oh, Dr. WARR. Oh, that's me. I'm a doctor.
Coffee brew so slow.